In the last section, we wrote out some logic to promisify our client.get function. We then use client.get to check our Redis cache to see if we've ever fetched any blogs related to this particular user before. We then assign that to cache blogs, and now we're going to move on to the next step of our logic right here. So we're going to say, if we have stored a list of blogs, like if cache blogs contains a list of blogs, then we're going to try to respond to our request right away and return from this handler. So to do so, we're going to write out if cache blogs like so. So if nothing exists at this key, if there's no value there, cache blogs will be null or undefined. Those are falsy values. So if we just write out a simple if statement right here and cache blogs is not defined, then we're just going to skip right over this block entirely. So then inside of here, assuming that we do have a list of blogs, we'll write out our logic to immediately send back a response and return from the request handler. So for that, we'll write out return res.send cached blogs, like so. So now we'll handle the other case, the case in which we do not have any cache blogs. So in this case, we do have to issue our query over to Mongo. So that's this query right here. So we're going to let this thing run. We'll then take this result, we'll send it back to the user, and then we'll update our cache with this list of blogs. Now notice that we've got this kind of like if yes, if no statement right here. We do not have to put on an else here. We don't have to put on an else because inside this if statement, we have a return. So if we go into the if statement, we are going to return and nothing else inside this handler is going to run. So we don't need another like else statement here or anything like that. Okay, so right here, we are going to let the query run. We get our list of blogs, we assign it to the variable blogs, we send the response back to the user, and then the last thing we have to do is update our cache and store the list of blogs that we just found. So I'm going to say client.set. We've used the set function a couple times now over inside of our REPL. Remember, the first argument is going to be the key that we want to define, and the second value will be the actual value that we're trying to assign to it. So client.set, and I'll say rec.user.id. So that's the key that we want to define. And then the second argument is going to be our list of blogs. So I'll pass in the list of blogs we just found. Now, before we try to test this out, one big thing. Remember what I just told you 2 videos ago. Whenever we store objects inside of Redis, we have to stringify them into JSON ahead of time. So blogs right here is an array of objects where every object represents one individual blog post. So we have to make sure that before we pass this thing in, we convert it to JSON. And we also have to remember that this thing that we're pulling out of Redis right here, this is this is JSONified as well. So we have to turn this back into a regular JavaScript array full of objects as well. So let's not forget that step. Okay, so down here at client.set, I'm going to make sure that I stringify this before I pass it into Redis. And then back up here, after we pull this thing out, I'm going to make sure that I parse this from its string form as well. And I think we can just parse it right before we actually try to send it back to the user. So I'll do json.parse, like so. Okay, so that's pretty much it. That's all the logic we have for this request handler, and we're now just about ready to test this out. Before we do, I want to add in one little line of code that's going to help us really understand what's happening. So inside this if statement, I'm going to add on a console.log. I'm going to say serving from cache. So if we see this console log, that means that we are not touching MongoDB at all. And then down here, I'm going to add on another console log. I'm going to say serving from MongoDB. So now we'll have a really good idea of where our data is coming from. All right, I'm going to flip on over to my terminal. I'm going to make sure my server is still running. Remember, you can start your server up by running npm run dev. Once it's running, I'll then flip back over to my browser. I'm going to open up my blog application, and I'm going to refresh the page one time. Now, if you're not at localhost 3000/blogs, you just have to get to that URL. So remember, localhost 3000/blogs. That's when the API/blogs route gets fired from the React client. So I'm going to refresh this, and I still get my blog appearing on the screen. Now let's check our terminal and see which of the two console logs appeared. Okay, this is kind of a letdown. It says serving from cache. There's a very good reason for that. It's because I actually tested this out before this video and I forgot to clear my Redis instance. So I'll tell you what, let's, as a neat like kind of side thing that you should probably know anyways, I'm going to show you how to like delete all the data that runs inside of Redis. So little quick side topic here that I was not quite expecting, but nonetheless, here we are. So we can pop open our node REPL really quick. And if we set up our Redis client again, like so, we can call client.flushAll, I believe it is, like so. So client.flushAll, notice how it's lowercase a right here. That will just wipe all the data that is currently stored inside of Redis. So that will give us a little bit more of a clean slate to test this again. Let's just pretend that didn't happen to me. Okay, so I'm gonna go refresh again. Now if I go back over to my terminal, I see serving from MongoDB. Definitely what I expected. Definitely what I expected. But now here's the cool thing. Here's the real test. Now, if I go back over to the application again and refresh the page a second time, let's see what happens now. So I'm going to refresh again. I'm going to open up the terminal, and now you'll see serving from cache. So this first call to MongoDB right here, that went to Mongo, it got our data, it returned it, it then stored it inside of Redis. And now the second time we refresh the page and make a second request to that handler, our data is now inside of Redis, and so we are serving this data from our cache. So if I refresh a couple times now, so I can refresh, and maybe, what the heck, one more time. And now go back over to my terminal, you'll see that we are always serving this data from our cache. So definitely working the way we expect. Now, a couple of quick caveats I want to throw out here, or maybe just one for right now. You might notice that it's really taking a long time for these requests right here to resolve. You might be thinking, well, Steven, shouldn't this have like really sped things up? Just one thing to keep in mind, we are only starting up this Redis client when a request comes into our request handler. So when a request comes in, at that time, we are requiring in Redis, we are trying to connect over to Redis, and we're doing all this extra work right here. So right now, things might seem a little bit slow, mostly because we are doing all this extra work the instant any request comes in. Obviously, that is not at all ideal, and we absolutely will refactor this to a much more slick and reusable fashion. So with that in mind, let's take a break right now. We're going to come back in the next video, and I'm going to show you a couple things that are kind of missing or not quite working as we would expect with our current caching setup. So I'll see you in just a minute.